Hi everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, Raid have just posted all of the information about the champions that are being added to the game and the next couple of days, I think, for December, right? Tying in directly to that December fusion. In fact, the fusion champion, if I skip down here to Tataru Rimehide, he obviously is coming in this. But yeah, this is a complete blind look. Let's dive in, take a look. Again, I can't show you any test server footage because I'm not on the test server. I'm a brand new channel for Raid. So yeah, if you want to throw any likes or subscribes, if you enjoy the content that is, then that would help out. I'd love to get onto that test server eventually and start testing out these champions in game before they come onto the live servers. But anyway, let's take a look first at Glycia Soul Guide. So she is a new legendary, not part of the fusion, but she, I think if you look at her visuals, right, she's like this sort of blue ice with gold, very much matching in with Tataru Rimehide. So yeah, I think she's supposed to be somewhat of a companion to the fusion, but she's not actually part of the fusion. She's force affinity, defense based in Sacred Order. Her A1, Glittering Slash, attacks one enemy, 30% chance of placing freeze, bucks up to 50% to freeze, and also does debuff spread, taking one random debuff from the target and putting it on all enemies under freeze debuffs. This is very solid A1, I would say. 50% chance to freeze. That's a good solid A1. The debuff spread's a bit of a bonus. That's obviously quite situational to have enemies be frozen, but perhaps that could do some pretty interesting things. It's a question mark how effective this will be in practice, but the freeze just by itself is good. Next up, we have Breath of Rime. Okay, attacks all enemies, places a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns, also steals one random buff from each enemy under freeze. One thing I love about this, look at this. The books, only 3 books needed, and they're just upping the damage. So it's a guaranteed weaken, places weaken, always happens, always steals, and it's always a 3-turn cooldown. So she's very book friendly, actually. That's pretty great. Seems like a decent move. An AoE attack that places weaken. It's solid enough. Everwinter then, place block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns. Also has a 60% chance of placing a freeze debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Fills this champion's turn meter by 15% for each freeze debuff placed by this skill. This goes up to 80% chance of placing freeze. You make that 85% with masteries. That's extremely good. 4-turn cooldown. That is incredibly good. That is so good for basically every wave control, every arena fight in the game. AoE block debuffs on you, AoE freeze on the enemy, and potentially boost her turn meter by, let's say, you freeze 3 or 4 enemies. You're looking at, 45 to 60% turn meter boost for her, getting her into her next attacks. That's extremely good. That's a great move. Timeless then, her passive. Her skills cannot be put on cooldown. Okay, this is like an This is the anti-warlord, I guess, is her idea here. Can't be put on cooldown. Or Ramantu, I think, maybe can do the same thing. Not sure how this will interact. He can block passives and block active ability. Probably Ramantu. I don't know. I have no idea. Whenever an enemy tries to put either this champion's skills or an ally's skill on cooldown, place a freeze debuff on that enemy. Also has a 50% chance of denying the cooldown increase effect. Wow. Freeze debuff cannot be blocked or resisted. Will not deny cooldown increasing effects from bosses. And she also gives ally resist 6 in all battles. Great aura overall. So this is straight up like to counter Warlord in the arena. There's also some nasty waves in Doom Tower. In Doom Tower Hard that have warlords, and like there's one floor relatively early on, maybe midway through the tower. I can't remember which tower, the first or second rotation, which is like a bunch of warlords and a bunch of Madame Cereses, and it's abysmal. Yeah, it's horrible wave. She's gonna be great for that, but yeah, this is gonna completely shake up the arena meta. She's a great champion overall, and one thing I love about her is that, hey, you pick her up, and even if you aren't able to put any books into her, she's going to be fantastic. Just straight up fantastic from the get-go. So she's looking incredible. Wow. Tataru Rimehide, we've already seen. I've got a video on Tataru, so I won't cover him again. He is the fusion champion, but pretty solid overall, defense-based, spirit affinity. He can decrease accuracy. He can put block buffs and increase defense on your allies. Now, he does need to be booked. Bringing this down to a 3-turn cooldown is fantastic. Then a 4-turn cooldown with an AoE attack that puts Perfect Veil on everyone and a shield buff on him. So I think he's very solid. I think he's very good. And everyone probably that can go for the fusion should go for the fusion. I think you'd be very happy to get Tataru. But I talk more about him in the other video. Chagger is next. He's a Void Legendary for Lizardman. Cool. Okay, he's attack-based. His A1 Stupor attacks one enemy, 50% chance of placing sleep debuff for 1 turn. This goes up to a 75% chance of placing sleep. Now, sleep is hit or miss, but that again can be useful if you're more manually in control. So for some arena fights, for example, it's a pretty solid A1, I would say. We obviously don't know how hard he hits from this, but we'll see. Venom Storm is A2, attacks all enemies 2 times. First hit has a 75% chance, bucks to 100% chance of placing a poison debuff for 4 turns. Second hit has also 100% chance when booked, placing 6% decreased defense for 3 turns. Wow. This is a 4-turn cooldown, goes down to 3 turns. So that's a long-lasting poison. And yeah, decreased defense, AoE on a void affinity. Solid. That looks pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Obviously, this won't hit crazy hard in the sense that the second hit places decreased defense, so that decreased defense won't be up for the first hit. But yeah, this looks pretty solid. Heartstopper's up next. Attack one enemy. Attack 1 time at random. If the target's under a poison debuff, ignore shield, block damage, and unkillable. Very nice. Gives an extra turn if you kill an enemy. Also resets the cooldown of the Venom Storm skill if this attack kills 2 enemies. Oh boy, so you're going to build this guy for like serious damage. Yeah, and he's going to come in Venom Storm, and then your Heartstopper is going to just rip through the enemy team and potentially just let you Venom Storm again. He's going to be an absolute beast for arena nuking. Constant Agony, his passive, instantly attacks enemies with the default skill whenever they receive damage from poison debuffs placed by this champion. When hitting enemies under poison debuffs, heals this champion by 10% of the damage inflicted. Again, that's very solid. That's very solid, and this could be kind of nice for some dungeon runs. Like if you're running a poison exploder sort of team, he gives you the decreased defense for some extra damage in his A1. One thing I'm interested to see, very interested to see, is what happens in arena then. Like what happens just in general. So let's say you do your Venom Storm, they have the poison on them, they take their turn, take the poison damage at the start of their turn, and you attack with Stupor, and it puts sleep on. Does that sleep then cancel out their turn? If it does, that's incredibly broken. Like, that is incredibly broken. Though I guess you're going to be then in a little bit of a tricky situation with this guy where you will want to build a lot of attack because it seems like he's going to hit real hard, but you're also going to want a lot of accuracy. So it's a common problem for like Roman 2, for Astralon, lots of nukers that need both accuracy and damage. That can sort of pull you in 2 different directions. But yeah, if that is how it works, then that's extremely, extremely good. I have to imagine it is, because otherwise, what's the point? I guess just for damage. But yeah, because poison damage normally wakes people up from sleep. I have to assume he seemed very good. So very, very strong. If that is how it works, I think he's crazy good. Umatogi is next. She's an epic magic affinity for the Shadowkin, an attack-based champion. Let me just flick through. So we got magic, we've got a spirit and force. I think that, yeah, okay, so these are going to be the 4 epics that you can get in the fusion. Now again, we'll see if they are good. Potentially you will be able to pick up an extra copy of these epics in some of the tournaments and events, but yeah, they're going to have to be really good for you to not go for the fusion guy. I really think you want to go for the fusion, so you probably won't be holding on to these for too long, again, unless you get a bonus one. Sai Assassin attacks an enemy 2 times, has an additional 20% chance of doing a critical hit if you're under Veil or Perfect Veil. Okay. Will she have some ways to Perfect Veil? Looks like she will. Silent Parting, or A2, attacks an enemy 2 times. Each hit ignores 20% of the target's defense. Has an additional 20% chance of doing a crit if she's under Veil or Perfect Veil. That has a 3-turn cooldown when booked. She's going to get a lot of damage from books, like 30% bonuses on both of these is a ton of extra damage. Fade into nothing, puts Perfect Veil and increased speed on this champion for 2 turns, then fills her turn meter by 40%, 3-turn cooldown when booked. So she's going to be fast, and she's going to hit very hard single target, and you're going to need less crit chance on her. Pretty badass. She could be a good Hydra damage dealer, actually, right? Giving you Perfect Veil so you won't get feared if you don't have Shamael in your team. Could be a solid self-perfect veiling, hard-hitting single target damage dealer. Standoff. Whenever this champion's attacked, completely blocks 1 hit, decreasing the incoming damage to 0, then counterattacks with the default skill. When attacked by a boss, decreases the damage by 50% instead before counterattacking. That has a 2-turn cooldown. It's a long enough cooldown. That's pretty solid, again, to help keep her alive. Perfect Veil, of course, as well. Does give you damage reduction too, and crit rate in all battles for your allies. She's pretty solid. She seems pretty solid. A solid single target damage dealer. Her kit synergizes well together. Veil herself up. She's going to be speeding herself up too. Then probably hard hitting single target hits. Chances to block damage. She seems pretty good. Pretty decent, actually. Pretty decent. Masamoto's up next. He's a defense, spirit-based Shadowkin. Epic, of course. His A1 dual slice attacks an enemy 2 times. Has a 10% chance of stealing a random buff. That goes up to 30% chance of stealing a random buff. It's a very low chance, so I'd say this is relatively weak. Nice if it works, but it's not reliable at all. Steel Typhoon is his A2, attacks all enemies. 50% chance of placing 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. That goes up to 75% chance with a 3-turn cooldown. Again, so this is only okay, I would say. You do have epics that can be, attacking and placing both decreased attack and decreased defense, like Stag Knight or Duck the Pierced. Like, Duck the Pierced is a defense-based champion that's just straight up better than this for now. Yojimbo places 60% increased defense buff on all allies. Okay, this is good for 2 turns, and fills turn meters of all allies by 15%. 4-turn cooldown when booked. Now, this actually makes this guy pretty solid, I would think. That's actually pretty nice. So, a bit of a turn meter boost. I guess, funny enough, there is a rare that does this better in the game. Doom Screech, I think, gives you 30% turn meter and also increased defense. But this guy, he's probably going to hit harder than Doom Screech does. And he does bring the AoE attack with decreased attack. Not bad, actually. I think he's pretty okay. Just really for Faction Wars. I don't see you using him anywhere else. This guy could be a good solid epic for Faction Wars, helping you stay alive, go a bit faster, just increase defense, decrease attack, Basically that, just minimize the damage the enemies can do to you. They're a pretty squishy faction, Shadowkin, so he could be a solid epic for them. But yeah, nothing too special. Visionary up next. She's a support for the Dark Elves. Her A1 attacks an enemy. 30% chance of decreasing target's turn meter by 15%. Chance increases to 100% if the target's under decreased crit rate or decreased crit damage. 100% to decrease turn meter by 15%. It's okay. Though obviously very situational. Haunt is up next. Attacks all enemies. 75% chance of putting decreased crit rate or and decreased crit damage on all enemies. This has so it bucks up to 100% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. So AoE attack, decreased crit damage. Again, I'd say that's pretty situational for PvE. Is she strong enough for PvP? I don't know. Interesting. Dark Dealings puts an increased crit rate 30% buff and 30% increased crit damage on all allies for 2 turns, and fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. And then she gives you ally speed in dungeons. She's not terrible, actually. I think there's some potential for her. I kind of like this, right? So 3-turn cooldown. Boost your own team's crit rate and crit damage and some turn meter boost. Decrease enemies' crit rate, crit damage, and then do some turn meter steal as well. It's not a bad kit, I guess. I mean, obviously this stuff is situational. Like, most enemies PvE don't have 30% crit rate. I mean, it's possible she could be okay. I'm not sure where you would use her. Like, you'd want a team with very low crit, like lower crit rate to boost it up. Maybe in Clan Boss, this could be okay. Big crit rate and crit damage buffs and some turn meter. Potentially she might fit into some sort of unkillable team, like Bat Eater-esque team. Less turn meter boost on a shorter cooldown. You need a lot of speed to make up for it. But she has some potential. I'd be curious to see what we can theory craft for her. Again, I can't think of any immediately tangible situations, but she's an interesting champion with the potential to do some cool stuff there. Then finally, for the Fusion Epics, we've got Broodlord, who's a defense force affinity Lizardman. Patient Tactician attacks an enemy 2 times. Each hit 30% chance of placing Provoke for 1 turn. If the target's under decreased speed, that goes up to 50% chance to provoke each hit. So very high chance to provoke if they're under decreased speed. That's a good A1. That's good. That's solid. Defend the Nest. Places ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Then block debuffs buff on that ally. Oh, sorry. No. It places 50% ally protection buff on 1 ally for 2 turns. Then puts block debuffs on that ally for 1 turn. Also puts a shield in this champion for 2 turns equal to 20% of his max HP with a 3-turn cooldown. So he's like a very, very bad Very bad neck ret, I guess, is what's happening here. It's okay. This is a bit underwhelming. Like, it's only okay. Primal Tremors up next. Attacks all enemies. 40% chance of placing stun debuff for 1 turn. And this is pretty good. Buffs to 50%. Chance increases to 75% against enemies under decreased speed. Okay. So 85% chance to stun on a 3-turn cooldown AoE attack on enemies under decreased speed. Again, it's pretty good. So you're really going to rely... Actually, you know what? Like, it's not bad. If you consider that he's provoking, the self-shield isn't bad. It's not bad. Depends how much HP he's going to have as a defense-based champ. Okay, and what do we have here? Whenever he's attacked, or whenever allies under ally protection are attacked, has a 30% chance of placing 30% decreased speed debuff on the attacker for 2 turns. That goes up to 45% chance. So this, I would say this is not super reliable. I feel like you probably want another way of applying decreased speed so he can really take advantage of it, and he's just supplemental. This is kind of weaker, but it's not too bad. And ally defense in all battles. I tell you what, he's actually pretty solid for Lizardman Faction Wars. Lizardman Faction Wars, the final boss, he's the guy. He does really heavy single target damage that ignores defense on your team. So this guy being able to put up a shield on himself and ally protection actually be pretty useful for getting past that. And then obviously his stuns and the provokes would help you get through the waves. So I think he's pretty decent. Outside of Faction Wars, do I see him being used? No, not really at all. But he seems like a decent Faction Wars guy. Then we have some rares. Let's take a look at these. Itinerant. We'll go through these kind of quickly because the rares are probably not that useful unless they do something crazy. Soul Tap A1, attack 1 enemy, chance of placing leech. 50% chance if the attack's critical. It's actually pretty decent. It's okay. Wanderer's Weirding for like a rare. Wanderer's Weirding. AoE attack, 50% chance of placing 15% decreased speed. Also places increased speed buff on this champion if the attack's critical. Waste away, attacks 1 enemy. Decrease the enemy's max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted if this attack is critical. 4-turn cooldown, so 3-turn cooldown. Nah, this guy, not good. No good. Don't bother. Castigator. Wow, what a portrait. I like it. I respect. He's got kinks. I like it. HP based. Magic Affinity Sacred Order. Castigate. Attack an enemy. 25% chance. Books up to 40% of placing provoke debuff for 1 turn. Not terrible for a HP champ. It's actually okay. Holy Equity. Books to a 4-turn cooldown. Heals the ally with the lowest HP by 20% of this champion's max HP. Then equalizes the HP levels of all allies and grants this champion an extra turn. Okay, this guy could actually be good. This could actually be good. It's a 4-turn cooldown, but he's giving himself extra turns. He's HP based, so he's going to do a pretty chunky heal and then equalize. I think this guy's actually pretty solid. This guy could be good for Faction Wars right there. Receives 50% less damage from enemies under provoke. Whatever. I mean, just coming in as like a Faction Wars, a little bit of extra provoke and just some healing. Like, if you don't have a healer for Sacred Order, this guy could actually be pretty solid for it. Slap him in a shield set. Whatever. Slap him in a shield set. He does some extra healing. He could actually be okay. He could actually be good. Misery Chord. Magic Affinity. Attack. Banner Lords. Rare. Pity Slaying. Attack 1 enemy 2 times. I feel like attack-based rares are going to be difficult to make work. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance. Placing decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. This is the big one. But 25% chance when booked. That's a super low chance. Very unreliable. Stay Vigilant. Attacks all enemies. Fills this champion's turn meter by 5% for each living enemy. That's not terrible. Like, probably like 40%. Sorry, 40%. Probably 20% turn meter boost, roughly, on a 3-turn cooldown. It's okay. And then Bitter Tears. Places counterattack buff and 25% increased attack buff on this. That's the small version. On this champion for 2 turns with a 4-turn cooldown. I'm not really jumping out of my seat to pull a Misery Chord here. Probably has very low base stats because she's a rare, so I feel like this is not going to be very good. Then Ordinator. Finally, Dark Elves, attack-based Force Affinity rare. Weighty Punishment, attacks an enemy, 25% chance of placing freeze debuff for a turn. Pretty poor, too low. Obedience Collars, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a bomb debuff that detonates after 2 turns. That goes up to an 80% chance on a 3-turn cooldown. That could actually potentially be okay. It's hard to know. So the weird thing about bombs, you guys might not know, but bombs all have their unique attack scaling. Or, well, I think that bombs by themselves have something like, I don't know, maybe a 4 times attack scaling on the bombs, and bombs ignore defense. But But the weird thing is that then a lot of champions have modifiers. So like I have Lord Shazar, for example, but his bombs don't scale that much off attack. I think he only has a 2.4 scaling on attack on his bombs. Weird stuff like that. So don't know how hard these will actually hit. It's okay. Like for Faction Wars, it could be okay. Yeah, maybe. When attacked, has a 30% chance of decreasing all bomb debuff detonation countdowns on the attacker by 1 turn. Maybe he's okay. Maybe for Faction Wars. I feel like there's a plenty of good Dark Elves. Dark Elves have plenty of really, really good damage dealers. I feel like what they more lack is more supports and healers and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm curious, but I don't know if there's a purpose. Yeah, but there we go. So that's all the champions. So for the rares, actually, some of the rares with potential, I think that Castigator's got very nice potential for Faction Wars. And Ordinator, low potential. And then probably the other two I probably wouldn't bother with. They seem quite weak. All the epics seem pretty solid. Like Broodlord's solid for Faction Wars. Visionary, very curious whether these crit buffs could be useful or not. Masamoto, very solid for Faction Wars. And Umatogi, I think actually looks pretty decent all around. Could actually be pretty good for Hydra if you're really lacking perfect veil damage dealers for Hydra. She could be strong for that. And then I think all the legendaries look really solid. So there you go. Nice set of champions. Let me know what you think. Which ones are you most interested for? Are you excited for any of them? Have you seen any potential that I've missed? Let me know. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.